Harley Quinn is usually pretty unstoppable just in general as a character, but trust me, there are even more unstoppable versions of her out there spread across the timeline and throughout the multiverse. Welcome back, Nerd Squad, it's me, Amanda. Some people are calling Harley the DC version of Deadpool lately. What do you think about that? Number 10. Harley Quinn, the animated series. I love this version of Harley Quinn. She is definitely one of my favorites and definitely one of the most unstoppable versions of the character that I have seen. Even when you feel like there is no way that Harley and her crew will be able to survive and move forward, they have a tendency to always come out okay, and often even on top, even in the most dire and bleak situations. Harley Quinn here is also an extremely stubborn and determined character who fights to make a name for herself and achieve notoriety as a famed villain, and for that we love her and must pay respects. Harley Quinn from her own animated series is voiced by Kaley Cuoco. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us that you love us by clicking that like button. Boop. Number 9. Batman the Damned. Not only is this version of Harley completely terrifying to behold, but she is also fairly deadly as well in practice. After the Joker was killed, this version of Harley decided to start dressing up as him and terrorizing Gotham in his stead. At one point, she even almost takes down Batman herself. Possibly even more frightening to consider when it comes to her power is that Harley herself was likely mistreated by the Joker and uses this to fuel her own sense of brutality and violence. While I would still say this Harley was initially pretty unstoppable, this version of Harley also has, what do you call that, when you're like a corpse and you have those scars? She got those, so I feel like if you got that and you're alive, and I'm just saying, that seems pretty crazy to me. While I would still say this Harley was initially pretty unstoppable, it should be noted though that she was eventually forced to rein in her attack on Batman. You know, because it is Batman, so at the end of the day. Also, it's literally a series named after him. Sadly, we don't have a Brian Azzarello Harley Quinn the series. Or maybe fortunately we don't have that. I don't know if I'd want that, to be honest. Number 8. Old Lady Harley. Old Lady Harley is pretty epic. For those who are unfamiliar, she makes her first appearance in Harley Quinn issue number 42 from the 2016 series, aka Volume 3. Volume 3 total overall. This version of the character exists in a DC parody version of the Old Man Logan universe from Marvel. Much like in Marvel's Old Man Logan, the world and specifically NYC and Coney Island have pretty much gone to hell, becoming a post-apocalyptic landscape. Despite being older, Harley ends up returning to Coney Island and ending a turf war by battling her gang of Harley's members, claiming the title of ruler of NYC by beating their unsuspecting selves handily. Number 7. DCU. Whether we're calling it the DCEU, standing for the DC Extended Universe, or the rebranded version that we now know, the DCU, simply standing for, you know, DC Universe, the live-action world of DC definitely has one of my favorite versions of Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie. Why do I think she's so unstoppable? I mean, have you seen her in James Gunn's The Suicide Squad or Harley Quinn Birds of Prey? She's completely unstoppable in both. In The Suicide Squad, Harley gets kidnapped, and while the squad make a plan to rescue her, she actually ends up escaping all by herself. That's right, Harley rescues herself here. In Birds of Prey, there are many moments where she seems completely invincible to me. My favorite is probably the car chase scene, which we get near the end, where she goes after Cassandra Cain, who's kind of being held hostage at this point by Black Mask, and Harley actually goes after them while they're in a car on roller skates with the help of Helena Bertinelli's Huntress. It's epic. Also, if you haven't watched Harley Quinn Birds of Prey yet, what are you doing? It's so good. Number 6. Bombshells. I think one of my favorite versions of Harley around is the Bombshells version, who also happens to hail from one of my all-time favorite universes in the DC multiverse. Don't you know? In Harley Quinn's series Harley's Little Black Book, Harley even teams up with this alternate version of herself, and together, well, not really working together, but more working separately and it kind of just working out. Well, rather Bombshells Dr. Quinzel working, and main continuity Harley just kind of messing around and getting lucky how she usually does. They end World War II. I don't know about you, but to me that feels pretty unstoppable. That's a big task even in an alternate fictional universe. That's a big task even in the real world. The Bombshells universe is actually set during the time period of World War II and imagines what our heroes, specifically our female heroes and anti-heroes or villainesses, would be like if they existed back then. Number 5. Rebel against Starro. This is the version of Harley Quinn we are first introduced to through her own Multiversity series. Multiversity, Harley screws up the DCAU. In issue number 1, Harley inherits a time machine from a mysterious Professor Incredulous. Against the wishes of her crew, the gang of Harleys and Egg Foo and Red Tool, well, Red Tool isn't really against it, but he is present for this, she decides to jump into the Way Back When machine and of course travels through time. While she doesn't exactly remember her entire journey, seemingly reeling from the experience alone, she does discover that her actions have somehow resulted in an alternate timeline where Starro has completely conquered the planet. She ends up being rescued by her own alternate self, who in this universe is a short-haired badass version of Harley who talks to her own bat and is part of the rebellion against Starro the Conqueror. Number 4. DCAU. Hailing from the DC animated universe, especially the corner of it pertaining to the Batman animated series, and resulting spin-off comics set in the same universe, we have kind of the original Harley Quinn, to be honest. While it seems a little weird to me to put her on an alternate list, since she is technically the main version of the character, there are those out there who actually still consider her an alternate because she hails from the animated universe as opposed to the comics, even though technically she came first, so she'd be the original. The Batman, the animated series version of Harley Quinn, is often depicted as being a lot more of a dangerous villain. She doesn't often hold back, and she doesn't often act as a hero. Unlike the modern day comic book version of the character, this version of Harley Quinn almost seems to be virtually unkillable and has at times broken the fourth wall, implying that she is even aware that she herself is a cartoon character, which to me is pretty powerful, I would say. Harley Quinn from the DCAU appeared in the Batman Adventures comic series and of course in the Batman the Animated Series, where she was voiced by Arlene Sorkin. Number 3. Red and Black Lantern. Although I believe the Little Black Book is supposed to be set in the main continuity, I kinda like to consider some of the really souped up versions of Harley as their own alternates. Also, Harley's kinda interesting, and I feel like even if it's main continuity, sometimes it's always kinda wonky with Harley. But although they do sort of represent a period of time in Harley's life in that main continuity, they often also stand separate from that with their own individual tales that stand alone. And for that reason they feel like an alternate version. Also, I'd be sad that I wouldn't get to talk about them, so here we go with one from Harley's Little Black Book. This one comes from an issue in the series where Harley Quinn teamed up with Green Lantern. Well, she kind of initially faced off against him, but in the end saved Hal and even briefly became a Green Lantern herself. However, Harley got her hands on a Red and Black Lantern ring and became herself a combo Red and Black Lantern, which is why they fought initially, which is also pretty OP as you might imagine, and of course pretty perfect for Harley with her red and black coloring. Number 2. Hammer Harleen. Another one of my favorite versions of Harleen technically comes from a very brief period in her main continuity story. This is Hammer Harleen. Hammer Harleen is a version of Harley who appears for only a few select issues in her 2016 series. While on vacation, Harley ends up getting recruited by Granny Goodness to become a female Fury. However, this only lasts about 1.5 issues as she pretty quickly annoys Granny Goodness to the point that her powers as a female Fury are taken back away from her, and of course she ends up imprisoned instead on Apocalypse, which I mean, if you're a Harley fan, I'm sure you saw that one coming. Don't worry though, with the help of her newfound friend, Petite Tina, Harley does end up eventually escaping back to Earth. Number 1. The Offer. When people often talk about the version of Harley that they think of as the most unstoppable or most powerful version, Year of the Villain tends to be the one that fans of the character most often bring up. When it comes to Harley Quinn comics, including Year of the Villain, I feel like almost anything could actually be considered alt reality. I mean, the lead into this event in the Harley Quinn series happened through Harley reading a Year of the Villain comic itself in canon starring her. Pretty wonky. And of course, when Apex Lex offered Harley her ultimate self as part of this event, Harley actually said, no thanks. So instead of becoming her quote unquote most unstoppable version, according to Lex anyways, Harley ultimately passed, which really makes this crazy cybernetic version of her powered by Yellow Lantern energy and a drop of Lobo's blood an alternate. That's about it. Until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube.